the way I like to think about it is that you are doing detective work. You have to research all these different things, all these different factors, the political climate, social climate, the architectural, everything that's going on, all these factors, and you have to kind of imagine that you put them on a wall, much like a detective would in the movies, and you start to draw connections between things. And you say, okay, there's something significant in this stew of stuff that I have. Right now, because I'm starting off, it's just miscellaneous ingredients and miscellaneous things. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where up and down is. There's no hierarchy. There's no structure. I don't know, but I know there's something here. And it's your job to then structure that information and weave it together and put red lines between them and whatever to figure out what are the key players, the key elements, the key factors, how those relate. And that begins to outline the problem, the fundamental problem that you're dealing with in this scene.
Or
right?
the story.
The story, right. And I do think about design as problem solving, which might be kind of old school for some people. I think it was Eisenman who said, it might have been Eisenman or someone else saying, like, architects don't problem solve. Like, what problems do they solve? Well, like...
bathroom problems.
I mean, it is a profession of problem solving because that's what you're doing all the time, but you could also argue that a lot of other things are basically just problem solving. You're always problem solving.
Well, and then also aren't we solving the problems that we created?
Yeah, that's true too. But it is an exercise at least of problem solving.
A lot of it, yeah.
So, I mean, it's problem solving in the sense that like you hope that your building is going to contribute to the betterment of mankind, right? So if it's a betterment, then you're improving on something, right? And the thing that you are improving on, you would say either was in a negative, was a problem, or if it's not in the negative, it's still you're bettering it. So in some ways, by definition, it is understood as a problem because you're going to be fixing it or changing it, right? So that's why it's problem solving. So I think for me that research is really important because it sets up the before. It sets up all the pitch.
I think it's important. The only thing I feel like sometimes it's a little too reassuring to just stick to it and not try and move to the next step after the research.
Yes.
Like there is fascination of like doing research and like, discovering things and all of that, or the fear of stepping out of that safe research phase because really you're just collecting, looking, observing and making conclusions, but you're not really involving yourself or making decisions yet,
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say, the research phase is a phase. And you need to get out of it at some point.
Yeah. No, you absolutely do. And this is the thing. This is the bridge between the research and the call it design, right? You obviously it's not like I do all my research for the first 10 days. Now I'm done. Now it's design time. You have to go back and forth between the two, right? To advance. So there's kind of an intermediate step where you are in flux. And that's the big question is how do you take this research and translate it into form? Into architectural understanding, right? Not solutions yet, but you need to kind of like formalize, architecturalize the research you're doing. So if I have a student who comes up and is like, okay, like doing this building for these people, the demographic is 60% that, 20% that, 10% that, 5%, 2.5%, right? That should be 100, I don't know. And that's what it is, right? So therefore, yada, yada, yada. Or, but then I'm like, okay, that's great, but how does this have formal implications, right? So there is the exercise of taking research that on the face of it is just words, numbers, and emotions and figure out how that relates to the built environment, to the physical structures around us. That's a difficult thing to do, but that's part of the analysis, and that's part of how you bridge the gap between research and ultimately designing something, right? So-and-so people, they have a sense of, there's a community that exists, right? There's a sense of social gathering that exists. Okay, that's great. How? How does the built environment relate to that? Oh, they use space a certain way. There's a courtyard that's done in a certain manner. Okay, that becomes food ingredients for your design. It becomes stepping stones for your design. I don't think a lot of designers actually understand what problem means. I think that most designers think about the problem on a surface level, and therefore they don't, and because of that, they don't have enough. Their research doesn't give them enough juice to propel them forward to have an interesting solution. So therefore, they don't believe in the idea of problem solving, or they start throwing in random conceptual stuff out of nowhere because they have nothing else to kind of like, power the design process and the design, right? Well, it's not because oh, I'm doing this kind of building in this place and there's not enough for me to do, so I have to start throwing in random stuff. No, that's not the case. It's you didn't do your research well enough, right? And I don't mean research in terms of like discovering new facts like Aaron Brockovich. I mean research in that you're not thinking deeper. You're not thinking conceptually in the research process, right? So an example I would use